remember being in a class during a really difficult time in my life. I was in a class called Music Business and the Arts, something like this, or Entertainment in the Arts was the name of the class. And in the class, what I loved about the professor is that he did something, I'll never forget it. His name is Rex McKenzie, and by trade he was an economist. And he had a lot of experience in the field and professionally. He wasn't just a guy who went to school for a bunch of years and then magically became a teacher. He did things in the world related to his field of expertise. And one of the things that I think he did really well as a teacher was he let us get dirty. He let us make mistakes. He let us have fun. And it's something that, honestly, growing up in a home where I was raised by my mom and my grandmother here in the Bronx, and then my mom and I moved to Harlem when I was 11, it's something that I grew up with in my house. I was used to, being invited to have conversations about things that are meaningful, that are happening in the world. But it's something I don't see in classrooms, right? I've been to a lot of high schools through the work that I do, traveling around the city and in other countries, and it's something in this country specifically that I don't see. It's oftentimes the person who looks like they're having the most fun, who's in the most control, they sit or stand here at the front of the classroom and they project all of their wisdom from the front to the back. And at 9 a.m. or 8:45 when class starts, what are all of you doing as students? You're sleeping, you're tired, you're bored, you would rather be anywhere else but on the other side of where all the fun stuff seems to be happening right here. And I see that everywhere. I think, unfortunately, it's the problem with how we think about school. That school happens here in a box, and everything else is a distraction. So you can't use your cell phones. Facebook is blocked on most computers in public schools. So is Twitter. So is any other way to communicate with the rest of the world of people that are also just as bored as you are, right? And what do? We're secretly texting when we think no one's looking. We're secretly having conversations, and all the things that our teachers and the authority figures, the adults, tell us are distractions. But I think that's just not true. I think that's actually probably the biggest lie of school. And it's something that made school very difficult for me because by, age 13, 14, I had this epiphany. All of my grades in elementary school didn't matter after my first year of junior high. All of my grades in junior high didn't matter after my first year of high school. And all of my grades in high school didn't matter after my first year of college. So every single year when teachers were telling me, get good grades, pay attention in class, you can pass this test, you can get good grades, and I'm buying into it, 1 year out into the new school, no one cared about my old report cards. No one even asked me about my old report cards. Even in my current profession, I'm a photographer and I'm a film producer. In my current profession, how many times do you think people have asked me, what did you go to school for? Before I hire you, tell me about your academic history. Not once. They don't ask. It doesn't come up. And yet all throughout school for almost 15 years, everything was about the grades. Everything was about that piece of paper. Everything was about getting the best score in class. And I'm honestly, I made myself really, really paranoid and frustrated and unhappy and miserable. High school was so tough for me. So I remember being in that math class, or the class with the teacher about entertainment in the arts, and I made a comment, and I said in the class, this was about 4 years ago, I said, what I think is really exciting about the world right now is there are jobs out there that are going to be created, and they're going to make people lots of money, and they're going to change the world, and people will really benefit from those jobs, but they don't exist right now. And someone in this room has the potential to make that job, and I want to be one of those people. And I remember saying that in the class and kind of feeling like, all right, that was a pretty good idea, awesome, But I didn't think much of it until afterwards. And Rex walked up to me, the teacher, and he said, Parris, I've heard you. You've been in 2 of my classes now. That's probably one of the most, riveting things I've ever heard you say. And that was a second lesson that I've learned about, my own personal blessing as a student, but also that I'd like to share with you all, which is, once in a while, you get a great teacher. Once in a while, you get a great mentor. Once in a while, you get someone who comes into your life who's doing much more than what they're paid to do. Unfortunately, that's not everyone. That's not most teachers. That's not most professionals. Most people are just doing their job. They're collecting a check, and they're hoping one day they can do their dream job. whether that's in retirement at age 62, according to the statistics, or they work at a hedge fund at a bank, or they're working in finance and they can do 10 years of hard work, and then at 40 they can retire and they can do their dream job. But in this country, it seems to be the case that everyone desires, once they start working, at some point in time, to be able, at some point in time, to do their dream job. If you're lucky, the dream job of your teachers is to be a teacher. If you're lucky. But that's not always the case. So when Rex said that to me, it indicated to me something really special, which was, this is what this guy is passionate about, and this is what he loves, and he's really great at what he does. So what that did for me was it set in motion something really interesting, which was, I said that it was a really tough year for me, that sophomore, or it was like technically third year in college, which was, I was in track to be an actor. I'd started off in the theater program in the conservatory at SUNY Purchase. So when we had a speaker here earlier from Purchase, I was like, awesome, represent. And the last day of my freshman year of college, something really interesting happened. Someone from the office in the theater department walked up to me and said, her name was Abigail, she goes, you have a meeting at 4 o'clock. I said, where? She goes, just come back here at 4. All right. Last day of classes, everyone's saying goodbye. We just finished our first year in the program together. It's a very competitive program. And everyone is now leaving the classroom and they're going away for the summer. My grandmother was on campus. My cousin was on campus. They were helping me move out. And I go to the office and she goes, wait right here. All right. And I wait. And then the dean of the program comes. And I'll never forget this day as long as I live. He calls me into his office, and I see one of my other teachers sitting across. And then we sit down. I sit, and I'm so happy for the summer, and so happy for all the things that are happening. First year in college, awesome. And he hands me a letter. He puts it in my hand, and then he just does one of these. And if you've ever seen that look, whether in business or in class, or you know what's coming. It's not going to be good, and it's probably only going to get worse. So you really almost have to slow yourself down so that you don't pull like a keeping it real moment and like really do something you regret. So now I'm like, oh goodness. And especially, I'll say in that particular moment, I noticed something that I want to speak about, but I'm not going to go on a side story, but it's the trap. It's the moment when you realize that you've been snared in a trap and there's not much you can do to escape. It's the moment when you feel really vulnerable and a little bit helpless. And I'm reading the letter, and basically what the letter said was, you've been expelled from this program for these reasons. And you have 2 options. Option 1, you can submit a letter of resignation. And your permanent record will appear as if you willfully walked away from the theater program. Option number 2, you can appeal. You can present your case to a review committee, and we will consider it to keep you in the program. So I'm looking at this letter, and I'm thinking, well, that's almost like being blackmailed, right? That's almost like some form of like it's a real sort of high-level professional FU move, right? I didn't have the opportunity to present my case beforehand and prepare for this meeting. I didn't have a lawyer present. This is my academic history, my education, my college career, freshman year. I'm 19 years old. My family wasn't communicated with. I was absolutely there by myself with a grown man, another grown man, and both of them had the power to basically ruin my college career. And I felt helpless, and I was furious. And the most that I could summon to do in that moment was just say, thank you for your time. Thank you for this letter. I'm going to read it over with my family. I'll get back to you. And that was probably the longest walk I ever took. The walk from that conservatory building to see my grandmother and my cousin, who were so ecstatic. They had just packed up all my stuff. We were about to go back to the city for the summer. They were so happy for me. And they knew something was off. But yet, in hindsight, looking back, that moment coupled with the class that I told you about from actually a year after that moment changed everything. Whereas for the entire time before that, from age 10, theater had been a huge part of my life, even a little bit of visual arts, both kind of hand in hand. That specialty, that one thing, this one thing that made everyone feel so special in the conservatory. There were over 1,000 people applied that year. 26 got into the company. I was one of the 26 elite. Everything shattered. And I had to ask myself what it would mean for me to really continue. And out of that came this understanding, at the very least, that I've been lied to. I started to ask myself questions that I'd never asked before, and see things that I'd never noticed before, really see them. How many of my friends that were seniors when I was a freshman in college in a theater program were getting jobs in the arts, in theater, with their specialty? Barely any. How many of my friends that were told, you're great, you're a great actor, your technique, all your talent, you're wonderful, you're ready, the industry is ready for you, how many of them are working right now in the arts, in theater? Very few. And I started seeing that more and more and more. I started to see, essentially, how much actors, artists, craftspeople are usually the last people called when important business decisions are made. They're usually the first people fired when cutbacks set in. They're usually the first programs you get rid of when school budgets are slashed. Right? But what's the number one draw in the economy? What's the number one export in this country? Besides debt, actually debt is number one. What's number two? Media. The arts. And it's depressing, because I felt like an artist who hadn't been trained to understand the business of really keeping my craft as something that I could live on, as something that I could share with the world. And that, in and of itself, changed everything for me. So I want to fast forward past that class to what happened next. That year off, when I wasn't in the program, changed my entire life. For whatever reason, I decided, well, I'm not doing performing arts, maybe I'll go to visual arts. But maybe I'll learn a little bit about business. So as you were talking about these multiple careers that the average individual is going to have, this is basically what happened to me. Within that 4-year period where I was in school after that point, I ended up working as an intern on Wall Street. At 2 different companies, 2 different summers. I ended up teaching kids about media literacy and the arts. I ended up working at a program in Harlem that works with kids who are quote unquote at risk, which I think is every high schooler is at risk of something. So it's a weird term, but I ended up working with them. Kids who had been arrested, kids who had kids who were in danger of being put into foster care, kids who were in foster care, kids who had just gotten out of foster care, and teaching them about job readiness. I ended up at one point in time selling my photos one winter that I put on little cards for the holidays. And then all of this, life happened. Knowledge, learning, teaching, classroom, all of the things that I thought and people told me school and college was all about, all those things were happening outside the classroom for me. And yet, because my mom's a teacher, because my grandmother is a teacher, because I love learning, and I think the purpose of school is to figure out what you love about learning, and to do that, I started to get more clear about what I could do and how I could pull it together. I discovered in myself that I'm really good at finding mentors. I'm really good at hearing no. Theater made me really good at accepting criticism, because you just can't make it in that kind of a world where it's completely it's hyper competitive. I've heard of, actors who slash other actors' tires before they go on audition so that they can't drive out to the audition. Actors in Hollywood, you hear these stories of actors who saw a script on their friend's desk, Hollywood well-known actors, and read the script and then went in and read for the role and got the part. All of these really kind of unethical things, but then there are also really good things. And all of those skills seem to have come together to give me entrepreneurial know-how. And I decided to start my own photo business. And I started to do a lot of different things, but what seemed to emerge within the photo business that I loved was relationships. I love watching relationships. Why? Because I grew up in a single-parent home. Because I grew up in Harlem in the Bronx, and I didn't see many examples in my community of really strong relationships. Because I've seen the sadness in my mother of what it was for her and is for her that I didn't necessarily have a father figure, that I had to find them. And so the idea of families being at the core of our communities, of society, of the businesses we create, of the ideas that we have about business, that no matter what your business is, you're serving someone's mother, someone's father, or someone's child. And when you remember that as you are offering your service in your business, if you were a teacher thinking of teaching as if your child were in the classroom, would you allow your standard of teaching to be how you educate? It would change how you teach. If you think of the product that you sell and imagine your child, receiving that product, it would affect how you sell that product. And it did a lot for me. The biggest thing was it allowed me to think about the kind of family I want, the kind of career I would love to have, my dream job, and to have that dream job. And what that led to, really simply, because I'm getting a sense that I might be running out of time, I don't have a watch on me, but I traveled. And for the last 3 years, I've been traveling a lot. The big opportunity that came the summer that I got that letter was a year later. I was working on Wall Street. A year after that, I was invited back to the conservatory. I was the first student in about 15 years to do so. I went back to prove a point, that the teachers had it wrong, that they thought they knew me, but if they'd really taken the time, they would have discovered other things. But then I discovered I didn't want to be there, so I left. And that's how it works out. You don't know. But I left. That summer, I left because I got an invitation to do something I'd never imagined would happen. I was invited to participate in a program in China, to be their photographer, all expenses paid, and it was my first international project. Rocked my world, did so much for me, and it helped me to see globally how much the students in the world are connected. And so now the project I'm working on is producing my first documentary as a producer. I'm not holding the camera, I'm not directing the film itself, but I'm putting the team together. In some cases I photographed it. So this past February, myself, the director, sound designer, we went to Norway, and we started working on this really awesome project about a festival that I attended in 2009 when I was a student participant. The festival happens in Trondheim, Norway, every 2 years. It's called ISFIT. It's the International Student Festival in Trondheim. They are the largest student festival that is focused on a thematic focus every year. In 2009, it was peace, peace building. In 2011, it was health, global health. They get 500 participants, over 500 from all over the world, and they represent over 104 different nations. This is all done by volunteers, and it's all done by volunteers who are students themselves. So what I'd like to show you is a trailer for the documentary that we're just started producing, just to get a sense of what it is, because again, this is all the effort of students.
So you can ask a transportation functionary who's driving the cars, and you can ask him, what are you doing? And he'll say, I'm driving these participants to the workshops. Why do you drive those students to the workshops? Because I want to create ideas and attitudes that will shape the future. We gather these students in Trondheim. We'll have a dialogue workshop. Here they learn how to facilitate, how to start their own project back in their own country. And since students are the leaders of tomorrow, when we have a basic understanding of how the world works, things will be more peaceful.
It all began basically having no money, having no more than an idea, and just inviting people and take it from there. We need to keep that spirit alive.
In the cultural exchange, all the participants were like, oh, really, you do that? And then someone would say, oh yeah, we do that in my country, and they were really bonding.
And it's been where you get confidence to know that we can actually foster change in the world.
This is what we get to do, the same things that you get to do. If there was one thing I could leave you with before I go, really decide for yourselves what you're passionate about learning. That is the one, and is, I think, the single biggest challenge of being in school, is everyone tells you what they think you should know, but no one asks you what you want to know. Ask yourself what you want to know, and make it your job as a student, whether it's in the classroom or outside of the classroom, to learn about those things. Because before you know it, I mean, I heard this all the time when I was 15, but I mean, I'm 26 now. To look back and realize how quickly high school went by is almost a joke. It didn't feel like 10 years, but it was. And when I look up again, I'll be married, and again, I'll be older, and eventually I'll look back and I'll wish I had more time. And I think that's the one most consistent thing that I've heard in every one of my mentors, the oldest being 81 years old. If you're really doing what you love, you always wish you had more time. If you're doing what you don't like, you always wish time were moving faster. Thank you.